Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our coffee chat with Dr. Feesh. Today's podcast is the third part in a series about growth mindset. If you haven't listened to the first two episodes, I would encourage you to do so because you may be a little bit lost with this one. You can find my previous episodes on Podbean. You can find them on my website, thedla.xyz, or on my personal LinkedIn page. However, in the previous episodes, we learned about the importance of having a growth mindset, how the brain acquires and it communicates information. We also learned about neural networks and the anatomy of a neuron. So in today's podcast, we will talk about how to maximize the brain's functions to optimize language learning and teaching. More specifically, we'll talk about different ways the brain grows. While there are many ways the brain can grow, we'll address 4 of them here and then discuss what you and I can do to help facilitate this process. So the first way that your brain cells grow is by how messages are transferred between cells. When connections are used frequently, more neurotransmitters can be released in the synapse, or the cell receiving the messages can become more sensitive to the chemical messages by increasing its receptors. Another way to increase your brain cells is through the expansion of dendrites. The more dendrites a cell has, the more synapses or connections it has to other cells. A third way that neurons can change is through the myelin sheath. This is a fatty covering which surrounds the axon. When this fatty covering amasses or thickens, the speed at which the messages are sent between neurons increases. So the thicker the myelin sheath, the faster the messages between neurons are delivered. Finally, as previously mentioned, researchers used to believe that we could not create neural cells after birth. However, we now know this is not true. The hippocampus is an area of the brain that plays an important part in memory, learning, and other activities as well. The hippocampus is where new neurons are formed, and by taking care of your body, such as eating well, getting enough sleep, exercising, and actively learning, you can help your brain grow neurons and strengthen its neural networks. So how can we facilitate brain growth and maximize the brain's capacity to learn? Well, in addition to taking care of your bodies, Dr. Anthony Wagner, who is a psychology professor from Stanford, notes that repeated practice plays a key role in optimizing neural functions. Research shows that the more frequently you practice, the stronger the connections in your brain become and the more efficiently they work. With that said, though, it's important to note that not all practice is equal. Not all practice is the same. According to Dr. Wagner, learning is dependent upon how much effort you put forth. If a task is too easy for you, then your brain does not grow. In other words, the practice you engage in must include what Dr. Wagner refers to as desirable difficulties or tasks that are cognitively challenging. So for practice to be effective, you must engage in deliberate practice. So how can we make sure that a task challenges our brains? Well, for one, make the choice to do tasks that challenge you. 2, when you begin to learn something new, try to connect it with something you already know. 3, follow these steps. Focus on a concept or skill for about 5 minutes, then go to a different concept or skill for the next 5 minutes. And after the initial 10 minutes are up, then return to that original concept or skill. So if you were studying English grammar, it might look something like this. Focus on the simple present for maybe 5 minutes, then study the simple past or practice the simple past for 5 minutes, and then return to the simple present the last 5 minutes. minutes if you are working within a 15-minute study session. This kind of practice is called interleaving. It requires your brain to work harder. However, remember that effort is good. So the harder you work, the stronger your brain becomes, and the easier it'll be for you to recall that information or perform that skill in the long term. Finally, how you spread out your study or practice sessions will also determine how much you learn and grow. It is much better for you to study 1 hour each day rather than cramming for 6 hours before a test. Research shows that if you get a good night's rest between practice sessions, then the information you learn or the skill you practice will fuse with your brain and help you to learn more in the long run. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our 3rd episode of Dr. Feesh's Coffee Chat. Until next time, take care, love you, te quiero, te amo, ahabukum, wa aini, saranghe, dostadora, sinisiburam, bas lubluv, doyu bang, mahal ko kayo, ayishiteru, ish libidish. Peace.